As you can see, I have my hot tub working. And one might rightly ask, how can one be curmudgeonly in the midst of such beauty and comfort? And I have to say, one cannot be curmudgeonly. Oh God, I'm so happy. Now here's what I want to talk about. I want to talk about horror this morning. My grandson Elijah called me up the other day and recounted at length this film Oculus that he feels is going to be the new genre of horror films. Tell the geese to be quiet, goddammit, I'm trying to talk. What do you think? They're going north or going south? It's February. I would think they're probably going north. Anyway, he felt that this was going to be the new genre of horror films. And I think if I read what he was, if I heard him correctly, what he thought was horrible about it was the notion that human beings could be compelled to do something by an evil force and have no memory. And in fact, their memory of what they had been doing during that time was entirely benign. But, shown photographic evidence, they were doing the bidding of this evil force. And boy, that just really was repugnant to good old Eli. Well, I suggested that kind of reminded me of this whole debate about the Russians and interfering with our media and our elections, that here we are passing these not me, not you, of course, but these knuckleheads in eastern Washington and northern Idaho are passing these memes around that have been provided by the Russians to create a sense of disunity among us and cause us to hate each other. One I can remember, and I don't know where I'm guessing it might have been done by the Russians. It showed this total sleazebag 20-year-old, and then right next to it was a photograph of this child about 6 years old with black eyes and bruises on her face. And it was talking about that this kid beat up this little girl, and by God, let's pass this around so that we can make his life as miserable as he made hers. And so I researched it, and there's nothing there. There is no such person. There's no such criminal action anywhere. It's just bullshit. So I'd say that, yeah, there's sort of a comparison between this Oculus movie, the idea of being compelled to do something by an evil force, and having no awareness that you are acting at its behest. Okay, so that's apparently Elijah's sense of horror. My own sense, what came from reading a book by Frank Herbert. He wrote Dune, but he also wrote The God Makers. And these God Makers, millions of years ago, had figured out how to be immortal. And the downside of being immortal is, what the hell do you do with yourself after 100,000 years, I'm sure you'd like to perfect your tennis game. I don't know, you'd probably like to boink every beautiful person you've ever met. Me and Elijah, we'd like to play Civilization all day long, every day. But, after, let's say, 1,000 years, 10,000 years, 100,000 years, you're going to get kind of bored, don't you think? So, in the God Makers, they figure out how to tap into, I guess, our amygdalas so that these ancient beings can experience the emotions that we experience and feel our terror or pleasure or whatever. So one of the things they invented is this thing where these grody little homunculus eternal creatures wants to have sex with some voluptuous nubile human. And, well, although, you know, after 10,000 years, would you really be limiting yourself to human females? I don't know. At any rate, so they are able with this machine to cause the human female to experience extraordinary ecstasy, pleasure, while being, well, you could say, raped by this immortal homunculus. And I'll tell you, as I read that in that book, I got this pounding headache. Oh, Jesus, this is the most horrifying thing. And I put the book away for a while and then picked it up and started reading it again. And then a few years later, I think this movie might be called Genesis. And this guy is cryogenically frozen, and before they can reawaken him, there's a nuclear war. So he is reawakened several hundred years later, and the survivors of the war are these two races, and the dominant race has two belly buttons, go figure, and the subordinate race are you and me. And the dominant race has found these old tools of the prior civilization called stims. And you can turn a stim up to plus 10 positive and down to minus 10 negative. Either one, 10 at either end would kill you through pleasure or pain. And the dominant race is able to train the subordinate race to do anything that's wanted. So this the hero of the story is taken to his quarters while they study him, and he's taken care of by this bevy of beautiful human women, and they are begging him to let them do something for him because they've been trained by these stims. Once again, that just creeped me out. That was horror to the maximum. And you need to go see Soylent Green. Soylent Green did not creep me out like that. It was bad, but yeah. And then there's just stuff that just scares the shit out of you. Like there's a movie called The Visitors. And I hate to spoil it for you, but I'm going to tell you that what is really cool about The Visitors is it's not fantasy. It's not made up shit. It's like completely possible, completely realistic, and geez, it is scary. But it's not horror. There's a difference, I think, between scary and horrifying, don't you think? So it occurs to me a few years ago that horrifying to me, something I simply cannot abide, I can't allow it to exist in this world, is hopelessness. I can't stand it. So, I read this thing about if you're going to prison, here's some great advice about how to take care of yourself in prison. And so, among other things, if you're not big, ugly, and strong, you're going to be somebody's bitch. And so if you're going to be somebody's bitch, here's some advice about how to survive that in prison. Jeez, that infuriated me to read that. So I couldn't get any politicians interested in the issue. Got to get tough on crime, cornhole these guys. Well, so I found myself a pen pal down in the Angola, Louisiana State Penitentiary. We have been friends now for about 20 years. I've been down to visit him 4 or 5 times, taken my son to visit him. And after we'd started our correspondence, he asked if I'd send him some money. And I was so infuriated, that, well, hell, that's what this whole thing's been about for him from the beginning, was to get me to send him some money. And then I thought, well, if I was in a hopeless situation, sentenced to life in prison, my family would forget all about me, and that'd be the end of me. I'd, in this hole, and I would need money, buy some crackers and cheese once in a while, maybe some extra shaving supplies, maybe some actual shampoo instead of soap. I don't know. Anyway, hell, what my guy does with the money I send him, every once in a while he buys Krispy Kreme donuts for everybody in his little block. Is that cool or what? So, hopelessness, just woo. And I remember Donna had a dog, and I didn't much care for this dog, but I took him out for walks or ride bike, and I'd get annoyed as hell at this dog every little bit, but he's just being dog. And one night I had a dream, and Sheppy was looking at me with this sense of hopelessness, like, why do you treat me like this? And I'll tell you, that dream changed my attitude and treatment of that dog. I cannot stand hopelessness. And I'd really be interested to hear from you. What is it with you? Have you looked at what is that thing you cannot stand for there to be in the world? And partly what I'd like to hear from you is, I'd just like to know, is anybody out there? Is anybody listening to these? Yeah, my grandson is. I think Dylan is. But, if you maybe just give me a thumbs up or thumbs down on the thing, that'd be fine. I'd love to know who the hell's watching this thing. Anyway, what is it with you that you cannot stand for there to be in the world? Horrifying.